one of the authoritarian tricks that has gotten us to this point is gerrymandering, and that is our one big thing this week. So, um, on Monday, Democrats in Texas prevented their state's House of Representatives from moving forward, at least for now, with a redrawn congressional map sought by President Trump to shore up the Republicans' midterm prospects as his political standing falters. Now, this is from the Associated Press. Let's talk about that statement for a second. They know they are unpopular, right? The Republicans know if trends hold, even kinda, they are going to get routed in next year's elections. So, and we talked about this a little bit last week. Republicans in Texas convened a special session nominally to do something about the recent floods there. But what they're really doing is trying to redraw the state congressional maps mid-decade. This is outside of the norm. It is against the law. This is what censuses are for. We do redistrictings every 10 years. So, in response, Texas Democrats have done what they've done a few times over the last, I don't know, couple decades maybe now, and they have gotten the hell out of Dodge to prevent the legislature from uh, uh, achieving a quorum. So basically, the Texas state legislature cannot conduct business without any of these Democrats there. They have absconded to Illinois under the protection of Governor J.B. Pritzker there. So let's talk about the Texas situation just a little bit really quick before we get to the Indiana portion of this story, because there is a Hoosier tie-in, unfortunately. Ross, I think it's your turn. Is this um, running away that the Texas Democrats have done going to keep the Texas Republicans from ramming through the new maps?
Well, I mean, I think it potentially can. I mean, it is the right strategy. It is the right thing to do. You know, if I'm playing poker at a table and the rest of the players are cheating, I'm going to get up and leave. I'm not going to keep putting my money on the table. So they're cheating. Um, you know, uh, all the things we've talked about today kind of all go back to this sort of sociopathic mindset that Republicans have, that they have no qualms about cheating, they have no qualms about lying, they have no qualms about being absolute hypocrites. It's like they're not wired right. The rest of us, you know, I don't want to win by cheating. I would not feel good about that. I don't want to lie to my family or to anyone if I can help it. I don't justify that. These people, look, they're not wired right. So to them, hey, so what? If we're going to get something out of it, we're happy to cheat. So look, I commend Governor Pritzker. I'm a big fan of Governor Pritzker, and I hope he continues to be very active going forward. I think he is a strong candidate for president, to be honest with you, and somebody that I would tend to support. And so, yeah, look, I think it may ultimately, and you also have to remember too. I'm sure there are congressmen in Texas, Republican congressmen who may not benefit from this. Look, the map is what it is. The voters are what they are, and anytime you move something to help somebody, it's going to hurt somebody else. And the idea is to hurt Democrats. But anytime you redraw the map, now there may very well be Republicans who get hurt by this. So there might also be Republicans in that legislature, as I'm sure there are in Indiana, as we will probably talk about, that might not be for it too. So it may not happen.
Yeah, with a lot of these folks, you see, I mean, even going back to the big beautiful bill and Josh Hawley with the Medicaid, right? Yeah, they always talk a big game about, oh, this is distasteful. I wouldn't do this. This offends my sensibility, and then they vote for it
Well,
anyway.
not if they're going to lose their seat. That's a whole different animal.
That is true, and it could backfire because, like you mentioned, the way this gerrymandering works, they're redrawing these lines. They've got all these safe seats now. So the Republicans in Texas say, okay, well maybe we can make this seat a little less safe to add some more Republicans to this district over here, and pull that district away from Democrats in that way. But yeah, it does dilute the vote in their original district, right? Um, Scott, we've seen in response to this shameless Texas gerrymander, California Governor Gavin Newsom, New York Governor Kathy Hochul have said, all right, fine, do it. We're going to do it too. We'll do it even bigger. Is
Yep.
that the right move?
I think you don't bring a knife to a gunfight. You bring a gun to a gunfight. What the Republicans are doing is real simple. They are trying to position themselves so that their minority, and they are a minority within the country, has a permanent ruling class, becomes a permanent ruling class. There is a reason why the ICE budget is allocated over that 170 billion that you referenced earlier is allocated over 10 years. It's because they expect to be in power for the next decade. And the only way the Democrats are going to do it is if they, to quote you, Brianna, basically grow a pair and actually step up and really fight. It's going to require Democrats to put aside our inherent sense of fairness and our and have a willingness to get dirty and extend ourselves into places where we don't want to go. And the alternative, if we don't do it, is we're going to lose in 2026, and then the Republicans have a permanent standing majority, right? And this is a I mean, we all know the map, right? It's going to basically be being ruled by our southern brethren, and we know how well that went for America back in the 1860s, right? We know the consequences
And
of that.
yeah, gerrymandering has been around since the founding of the republic. If you look at our
Yep.
graphic up there and you're like, "What the hell is that thing?" That's
Yep.
the original political cartoon,
Yep.
saying that Massachusetts governor rep or whatever Elbridge Gary, his district was shaped to look like a salamander. Apparently, that's what salamanders looked like in the 1700s. But really, back then it was kind of gamesmanship, but in the last couple decades, as computer technology has grown better, they can make these maps with such precision. I mean, they know exactly which voters they're pulling from one district to the next. It is almost guaranteed to work when they do these. Um, Brianna, I wanted to ask you though, like, we talked about Newsom and Hochul and California and New York. Did Democrats preemptively disarm in both of those states? They have independent redistricting commissions, which is what every state should have, mind you. These states are doing the right thing, and now when I mean, you might have to throw down and play dirty with these guys. They've made it so they can't. Did we shoot ourselves in the foot by being, I don't know, too good, obeying the rules, doing the right
Yeah,
thing?
I mean, it could, but I would say that those commissions can change and they can make decisions to change it and see these are people on these commissions. And I think that would, I would hope that they would see what's happening and see that it's really our only good option if the red states are going to gerrymander to try to get rid of all of the blue states or all of the blue seats. I think that we have to fight fire with fire at this point. But yes, I do think that it's a concern that they have these commissions. Are they going to be able to get around the commission to help save democracy, essentially, because that's what we're fighting for. It's not
Yes.
Republican versus Democrat. It is democracy versus fascism. So, and that's really what it is. So I would hope that the committees and commissions would see that and see that this is a maybe a necessary evil for a little bit. But overall, I think gerrymandering needs to end nationwide.
And this was part of the For the People Act, which Democrats had on the table after the Biden election in 2021. That was like their top order of business, and they couldn't get it through. It would have, eliminated gerrymandering nationwide, would have put in all sorts of lovely voting rights protections, and we couldn't get it over the line. This, I think, if Democrats are ever able to pry power from the Republican hands, this is something we're going to have to do right away. So until then, we find ourselves in this like race to the bottom, right? Oh, Texas is like, all right, well, we're gonna steal 5 seats. California's like, okay, well, we'll steal 5 seats. And New York's like, maybe we can get a couple too. So then the Republicans are like, oh, okay, well, if you're going to do that, then we're going to get some more. And that leads us to this week in Indiana, where our good friend of the pod, Vice President JD Vance, visited the Hoosier State this week, meeting with Governor Mike Mrvan and some of the Republican legislators here in the state to talk about redrawing our maps. Now, Indiana is already gerrymandered 7-2. There are 7 Republicans in our House caucus and 2 Democrats. Andre Carson in the 7th out of Indianapolis and Frank Mrvan in the 1st up in Northwest Indiana. Apparently, Republicans have a map. We haven't seen the map yet, but they could theoretically call a special session and pass a map to, at the very least, draw Mrvan out of his district. And theoretically, they could go really big and try to go 9-0, though it would be exceedingly difficult. They might have to dilute their power in those other districts too far. So, Braun said in his press conference with Vance after their meeting that, quote, we discussed a number of issues and I was pleased to highlight some of the great things happening in Indiana. A nothing statement, right? He gives no tell which way he's really leaning. Apparently, the legislators are not super interested in this. One of the reasons may be that these quote unquote fiscal conservatives would object to the special session costing Indiana taxpayers over $500,000. Maybe that's their reason. Maybe they think it's offensive. Who knows? Let me come back to Scott. Have I been with you recently? Let's come back to Scott.
Yep.
Is Indiana going to go through with this?
I think Indiana is going to go through with it. We have proven that we are Trump's special little friend, and Braun has, as far as I can tell, zero ethics. So does Beckwith. So why wouldn't they? And I will note that when JD Vance showed up, he was roundly booed at the building. I know the protesters who were there at the sit-in, and they did not even allow them close to JD Vance. It was shameful.
Yeah. Well, but hopefully he got the message and he heard loud and clear that the people of Indiana are not happy about this.
I don't think he cares. I don't think anyone in the administration cares. They're not concerned about re-election because they're rigging the game.
And this has been a long-standing feature of Indiana politics, So this week, former Governor Mitch Daniels came out against this gerrymandering effort, saying it would be just wrong. People there have a right to pick the person they want. My sense is you'd have to torture the lines to eke out another one somehow. It would be so overtly partisan that I would hope they would abstain from it. if redistricting were to happen, Daniels said, quote, the ideal ought to be districts which make geographical sense and cross as few jurisdictional lines as possible, end quote. So, okay, Ross, first thoughts, Mitch
Well,
Daniels, good for him, right?
well, I mean, so yeah, the thing about gerrymandering is obviously um, both sides have done it, and until nobody does it, honestly, everybody should do it. You know, that's my opinion in raw politics. As long as anybody does it, and that's that's one of the things that was discussed earlier about these commissions. You know, that is all well and good. I've been against them, um, not because I don't think we should have them and they should be fair, but if everybody's not doing it, why are you unilaterally disarming? And it's not only that they have these commissions, but these commissions have a mandate to create districts with a certain percentage. So they legally can't do the right thing in this instance of fighting fire with fire. California, New York will have to have a special election to oust the uh, the commission and let the governor and let the legislature pick the district. So it, we've put ourselves in a bad spot. I mean, the other thing is, again, if we go back to the 2000 map, where we had a Democratic governor, we had a Democratic majority um, in the House, in the state legislature, House of Representatives, but we had a Republican majority, 2-to-1 majority in the Senate. Eh, Go back and look at it sometime. That 2000 map is the most gerrymandered thing you ever saw. I mean, it is looks like a jigsaw puzzle. So the 2010 map, which Daniels oversaw, favors Republicans, but it is actually less gerrymandered than the 2000 map. The interesting thing to me going forward with this, and why it might not happen in Indiana, is it's very hard to predict these trends. If you go back to that 2010 map, they put the northern quarter of Marion County into the fifth. Why? Because that was suburban and wealthy, and they wanted that in the fifth. Well, by the time we got to 2020, holy cow, we don't want suburban voters in the fifth. So they took that out, put it back in Andre's district, and then put the southern quarter of Marion County into the sixth. So trends change, and if you're trying to gerrymander and say, we would like to, in 2010, we want as many suburban Republicans as we can get, and then you get to now, we want rural voters. We don't want suburban voters. So if you start thinking about it, I think all of these people care about saving their own necks. That's really, at the end of the day, all they really care about. And the only fairness, cost, it's about saving their own necks. So I think if they start looking at it, and when smart people start explaining it to them, the more you tinker with the map, the more the more uncertainty you have in the future, and that's the reason it might not happen here.
Yeah, and like, again, these redistricting efforts are only supposed to take place every 10 years after a census where we have more accurate data about, population trends and who's moving where it's growing, where it's shrinking, and whatnot. You mentioned the 2000 map and how it was gerrymandered towards Democrats. And but also, like, from 2000 to 2010, we actually had balance in the state house. Like, Democrats had representation, kind of commensurate with their support in the state, as opposed to now where, we're getting 44 something percent out of the statewide vote in statewide races, but we only have 22% of the congressional seats, and we have even less than that in the state house and the state senate are horribly gerrymandered down at that level. You mentioned the 2010 election, and I think this is kind of the most overlooked election in our generation. If you remember 2008, there was so much optimism, especially on our side of the aisle, with Obama coming in, talking about big progressive change. Maybe we were going to, get universal health care. Remember all that stuff that we talked about? Hope, change. Great. The backlash that followed to the Obama election, a lot of racism in there. Also, a lot of the Tea Party was an astroturf movement. It was funded by big donors. It was not grassroots. But that 2010 red wave election that followed introduced such gerrymandering at such scale in Indiana, in Texas, and all these places. It was part of a coordinated effort. Um, the project was called Red Map, Redistricting Majority Project. It was a Republican uh, scheme, basically developed by Karl Rove and Ed Gillespie. And after that census, after those elections, with the increase in technology and the map making software, that election really made it become so precise that elected officials could pick their voters. And we've been digging out of this ever since, right? Like Brianna in 2010, the Republicans, took over our state house. They gerrymandered themselves nice, safe House districts, nice, safe Senate districts, and nice, safe congressional districts. And we found ourselves in a hole since then that it's almost impossible to dig out of. Yeah.
Oh, that's what it feels like. I mean, we've been fighting for different districts. I mean, you look at the fifth district, right? Like Victoria Sparks is like horrible. She said, well, everybody dies, and that's just fine. And she just doesn't listen. And she's Ukrainian, but supports Russia. I don't know. But like no one has been able to unseat her. So it's digging out of places like that where it's these people are not serving Hoosiers. They're just not, these Republican representatives, and they're not listening and they're not showing up to these town halls, but yet people keep voting for them. Why? Because we're gerrymandered and people are voting for a letter and not the person. So I think that that is the struggle in Indiana, is that we are so gerrymandered that it's hard to overcome this inherent bias that people in Indiana have towards Democrats. They have there's Indiana's put out so much propaganda about Democrats being evil and wanting to unalive babies and things like that, and things that are just grossly untrue and false, but people believe it. So we're fighting from years of brainwashing on top of gerrymandering, and it's a very hard fight.
Yeah, and yeah, you've got this like stack of techniques layered on top of each other. The gerrymandering and the propaganda, and then the way the gerrymandering works. Like obviously, there's the inherent advantage built into it, but then you also get the depression of enthusiasm for the other side. Like, oh man, we can't win this seat. Why do I even go vote? You know, and then we get it's hard to recruit candidates in these seats because, well, why would I, if I vote, if I'm just going to get my ass kicked? No one wants to sign up for that, so it's really hard. And Scott, it's just like this self-defeating circle or downward spiral of unprogress, let's say. Yeah.
Yep, it is. And ultimately, government is there to represent the people. Okay. And we know what happened in 1776 when we felt that the British government was not representing us. They keep doing this, they keep pushing the people. At some point, we end up back in the same kinds of situations, right? History, as Santayana said, if you don't know your history, it's bound to repeat. And it seems like the Republicans do not know their history and they do not care.
Yeah. So, Ross, you've run for the state house. in gerrymandered district. What
Yeah.
what's that like to go out into these communities where you don't really have a whole hell of a lot of shot? Are the other Democrats in your district that you talk to just disheartened? They don't see the point?
Well, yeah. So, when I was talking before about the gerrymandered map that we helped draw, I'm talking about congressional districts only. The state house map has been gerrymandered in favor of Republicans for a long, long, long time, and that's because of the control of the Senate uh, that they have had in the state house for a long, long, long time. So Indiana at the state house level is the most gerrymandered state. Many of the groups that study these things point to Indiana as the most gerrymandered state. And as you said, it also generally every year is least in voter turnout,
Yes.
if not last in the bottom three, and that is no accident, right? Because um, in these gerrymandered districts, um, at least at that point, they're created mathematically to have more voters than the other. And basically the only way that you can be competitive in a gerrymandered district is if you have the massive turnout of the minority and extremely low turnout of the majority. And that is kind of a perfect storm. Some of them it's just impossible. Look, if you're in an 80-20 district, that's mathematically never going to happen. But if you're in a 70-30, 65, 35, that's where those people who are running for office have a fighting chance. That's the one thing that's interesting about this next election is Indiana. We don't have a presidential election. We don't have a Senate election. The top of the ticket is a congressman. Trump's not going to be here. He's not going to be here for Jefferson Free. He's not going to, and part of that's because of gerrymandering. They don't think they're going to lose any of these seats, right?
Right.
So you're not going to have money pumped in here. They're not going to spend money. Trump's not going to be here like he was for Braun in 18, running against an incumbent senator. It's not going to be like 2020 where he's there for Braun running for governor. So there is a possibility for super low turnout among Trump Republicans who are only focused on Trump and very little else. If Trump's not paying attention, he's not on the ballot. There's a potential for low turnout, but that's really the only way to beat gerrymandering is turnout numbers. And it, yeah, look, it's very disheartening for people who are running for office. But the last thing I would say is obviously those demographics change and cities change.
Mhm.
You look at Georgia. Georgia's considered a purple state. I mean, it is not because a bunch of rednecks in Macon decided to become Democrats. It's because a whole bunch of people moved to Atlanta,
Yeah.
and the bigger Atlanta gets, you know, Cobb County. I mean, that's where Newt Gingrich is from, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, at one time, Hamilton County, Indiana, at one time, these are the most Republican places on earth. But guess what? As the city grows, the people who are moving in are not rednecks. They're upwardly mobile people. They're younger people. They're demographics that help us. So that's the hope in the long run. And that's the last thing I would say about that gerrymander. You try to divide up 7 Marion County, and yeah, you might get a short-term gain, and you might knock out Andre Carson, right? But in the long term, you're going to create 4 super competitive districts, and as the city becomes more expansive, as those donut counties become Democratic, you may create 4 Democratic districts, and that's not an exaggeration. So, you know, as a political junkie, you almost welcome that. Like, bring it on. Give me a piece of Marion County in every one of those districts. Let's see what happens.
Makes me think of a couple things. It's like, yeah, you might get those those 4 districts that lean a little bit more Democratic. They'll just change the lines again in 5 years if they have to, right? But the way gerrymandering works, besides the obvious, is the depression, the feeling of hopelessness that you get in these rigged districts. And it is still so important to go out there, even if you are going to lose 80-20. Well, those 20 that you get, also, those votes are also going to the top of the ticket, right? They're not just voting in that state district; they're voting at the Senate level, at the congressional level, at the governor level, or whatever, or the presidential level. So those votes still count somewhere, and in the way of looking at politics is like a team sport. That's why it's so important to have folks up and down the ballot. uh Brianna, I will say this, and I said this last week: if anything, the fact that they're doing all this gerrymandering gives me hope that they're just going to try and steal the election the old-fashioned way, and not by, I don't know, declaring martial law or canceling the election entirely, or some Russian weird authoritarian shit. Am I like being too naive?
I So I don't know. So I go both ways on this because sometimes I feel the same way. Sometimes I feel, okay, they're scared. They're talking about redistricting. They know they're unpopular and they're scared. So that's, to me, seems like a good thing. However, we are in an age where we just talked about someone hacking into systems. And I don't think that it's impossible for someone to hack into our election systems, especially with who's in charge currently, and especially if they make them recertify all the election machines like they're talking about. I think that we have to have more concern over the security of our election machines, this upcoming election, and maybe not as much about the gerrymandering is more where my concern is lying, because I do see that as, yeah, if they do split up Indianapolis, we're going to get more congressional districts that are competitive. That's great. But will they be competitive? Will it be a real election? Or are we going to be taking out of another person's playbook where it's just the illusion of a free and fair election?
Yeah, this is the competitive authoritarianism model that they employ. In Hungary, especially, that's kind of the model I think Republicans are going for here. But also, Russia does the same thing, but they are a lot less cute about it. I mean, Putin wins every re-election like 98-2 or something. I mean, that is not a real free and fair election. I'm at the point where I think we need to have our elections supervised by like the UN and international monitors, just like you hear about in these developing countries where democracy are just emerging, and they have to go in and supervise these votes to make sure they're free and fair. I'm not sure we're going to have free and fair elections going forward, and that is a really, really bummer of a place to leave this thing. But I want to give each of you guys a chance to just shamelessly pitch yourself and tell the good folks where they can find you. Scott, I'm going to start with you.
Nothing to pitch this time. Just hanging out.
All right.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Ross, where can the good folks find you online?
Well, you can find the Bartholomew County Democratic Party at barthdems.org. I'm pitching electoral politics. My message to activists, and I'm one of them. If you have committed yourself to go to a No Kings rally, if you've committed yourself to join Indivisible or any of the other protest groups, that's terrific, and keep doing that. But at the end of the day, a protest isn't going to change who's running the country. It's electoral politics. You have to take that energy, accept the fact, and you may not like everything that the Democratic Party does, but we're not fascists. So you've got a choice. So I encourage everybody who doesn't like the government that we have to get involved in your local Democratic Party and fight for change. And we're doing it over here every day.
And I will add to what Ross said: if you don't like the way that don't like things that the Democratic Party is doing, get yourself involved with the Democratic Party and change the way they're doing things.
Amen, brother.
Brianna, you have a fantastic online presence, and I bet the people already know where to find you. But if they don't, where can they see you at?
So my biggest following is on TikTok, but I am also on Instagram, YouTube, Blue Sky, and recently Substack as the Recovered Republican. All of my content is trying to keep people informed, especially about Indiana politics, and trying to encourage people to get involved in the Democratic Party. I am a recovered Republican and have lived in Indiana my entire life. So I have a unique perspective of what the Republicans are thinking and how to combat that. And I talk about how you can have these conversations. And I also do interviews with people who are running for Democratic seats. So if you want to know more about who's running, follow me there and you'll see those interviews. The full interviews are always posted to YouTube.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Brianna Newhart, Ross Thomas, Scott Johnson, my panel today. You've all been great. I appreciate you. In the meantime, everybody, be sure you are subscribed to Project Next at projectnextindiana.com, on Facebook at Project Next Indiana, Instagram, YouTube, somewhere else, Project Next Movement. Y'all know how to use Google. Me, I am at whosleft.us, and you can find me on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at Who's Left, as well as on the other social media sites at ScottROG78. Until next week, this has been Who's Left This Week. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.
Thank you.
Thank you.